President Biden will dump Trump's America First approach today at the Munich Security Conference and the G7. He will recommend collective action in the face of the pandemic, climate change, and against power confrontations with China and Russia. He'll ask foreign leaders to match his investments in economic stimulus, infrastructure, and technology. Biden also wants to restore the nuclear deal with Iran that Trump pulled out of back in 2018, but Iran is not completely at peace with the suggestion and has asked for sanctions to be lifted before talks begin. On the phone with me now is Bloomberg foreign policy reporter Nick Wadhams. Hey, Nick, it's great to have you back on Quick Take. How are other countries reacting to this sweeping change in U.S. policy?
Well, so far it's been greeted with satisfaction, elation by a lot of countries you typically think of as, the most important U.S. allies, Canada, for example, France, Germany. There is some unease from other allies that really profited under the Trump administration. Eastern European countries like Poland and Hungary that are the U.S. has some qualms with, but are still certainly in the allied camp, feel though that things weren't so bad under Donald Trump. So I think what you're going to see is an effort by Joe Biden to thread that needle a little bit. Obviously, the most important U.S. allies like Germany and France really are welcoming this, but he's also going to make sure he pulls along other smaller allies, such as those in Eastern Europe.
As the United States has confronted this deadly pandemic, along with other countries, of course, I think a lot of the attention here in the U.S., Nick, has focused on domestic policy, of vaccine administration, of economic recovery. But I'm wondering about the messaging that President Biden has given to the American people, and particularly to Republicans in Congress, about the idea of ditching this America First approach. Because it's not necessarily an easy thing to communicate, right? Saying, hey, we're no longer going to be America First.
Right. It's pretty interesting because the America First slogan that Donald Trump repeated so often was something that really led other countries to bridle, and Democrats as well. They didn't really like it. But, when you actually listen to Joe Biden's message, like past presidents, they have always put America first. So it's a little bit of a canard there. But, what he is essentially saying is that what he wants to do is really bring in Congress more, bring in Republicans. He's pledged this message of unity and working more closely together. Of course, in the last month that he's been in office, there's been a lot of suspicion that he doesn't actually want to do that, coming back into the Iran nuclear deal, or his effort to do that, going back into the Paris Climate Accord. That's all stuff that Republicans vehemently disagree with. So they say, okay, well, so much for your message of unity. You're doing all this stuff unilaterally that we don't like without really talking to us first. So how much trust can we put in this idea that you really want to work hand in hand going forward?
Nick, where do things lie right now with the way that the U.S. is approaching relations with China and with Russia under the Biden administration, how it's working with other countries to deal with the relationships head on versus how the Trump administration worked with these countries?
Yeah, well, I mean, what you're seeing with China is essentially a lot is on pause right now. They are conducting a major policy review that's expected to take many months when it comes to China. Obviously, certain issues can't wait. There's a lot of work that needs to be done, and obviously crises that come up. The Iran situation is a perfect example. China's a member of the Security Council and was involved with the Iran nuclear deal. So the U.S. will need help from China as it goes forward in trying to get back into that. So, but I think what you're seeing, you mentioned this at the beginning, Joe Biden's priorities right now really are domestic issues, economic recovery and solving the coronavirus pandemic. So he'd be very happy to make sure there are no major foreign policy crises that soak up a lot of his time in his first months in office while he tackles those two things, which is also another reason why you're seeing this is his first big address to an international audience. It's coming a month into his term. By any other standard, that would be quite a bit later than normal.
Yeah, that's a really good point. Nick, I just want to end with talking about Iran. You mentioned the Iran nuclear deal. What has to happen for the United States to re-enter or to work with Iran in the way that the U.S. worked with Iran before President Trump in 2018?
Well, it's a great question because we don't really know. That there's a fundamental disagreement there. The U.S. says Iran needs to go back into compliance with the deal before the U.S. drops sanctions. Iran says the reverse. You need to drop sanctions before we come back into compliance. Neither side has been able to square that circle yet. You've seen the U.S. trying to sort of nibble at this problem along the edges by saying, okay, we're going to agree to meet with you. Let's put everything on the table and just start the ball rolling toward negotiations. But that was something that happened last night. The U.S. said it would be willing to do that meeting, but Iran so far is still sticking to this idea. Listen, you need to drop sanctions first. So we're still waiting to see how they're going to get around that problem.
Bloomberg's Nick Wadhams. Nick, thanks as always for your time. Have a great weekend.
The biggest stories the moment they happen from around the globe. Subscribe to Bloomberg Quick Take now for insight in an instant.